Hello and welcome to Everyday English Unlocked, the podcast that helps you learn natural, conversational English by listening to real people have real conversations. I'm Edward.
And I'm Victoria. Welcome back to the show, everyone. If this is your very first episode, hello, great to have you here.
So, a quick word for any new listeners. Every week, Victoria and I have a genuine conversation about an interesting topic. You listen, absorb natural English, and over time, your speaking and understanding improves.
Exactly. We speak clearly and naturally, not too fast, not overly formal, so it's useful whether you're intermediate or more advanced. At the end of each episode, we break down key phrases you can use yourself.
This is episode 7, and I have to say, today's topic is one I've been genuinely excited about all week.
Me too. So today's big question is, who is the greatest Briton of all time? We're going to each make our case, talk through some incredible figures from British history, agree, disagree, and hopefully give you a really fun conversation to listen to.
And, as always, pay attention to the phrases we use and how we agree and disagree. We'll come back to all of that at the end. Let's get into it.
Okay, Edward, let's just dive straight in. Who is your pick for the greatest Briton of all time?
My pick, and I've thought about this quite a lot, is Winston Churchill.
Right, okay, I had a feeling you might say that.
I mean, I have to say, the man was extraordinary. We're talking about someone who led Britain through the absolute darkest period of the Second World War. France had fallen. Hitler's forces were at the Channel. The situation looked completely hopeless. And Churchill just refused, point-blank refused, to give up or negotiate. And his speeches. I think that's what really sets him apart. What I love about him is the way he used words, almost like weapons. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. That speech still gives me chills, honestly.
Yeah, those speeches were incredible. Don't get me wrong, I have a huge amount of admiration for Churchill, but I do think history is a little complicated when it comes to him. He had some real flaws, and some of his decisions, particularly around the British Empire, are very difficult to defend.
That's a fair point, and I completely agree. He was far from perfect. But as a wartime leader, in that specific moment of absolute crisis, I think he was irreplaceable. Not many people could have held a nation together the way he did.
Yeah, okay, I'll give you that. So my pick is Florence Nightingale.
Ooh, interesting choice. Tell me more.
So, I think Florence Nightingale is one of the most underrated figures in all of British history. She worked during the Crimean War in the 1850s, and what she found in military hospitals was truly horrifying. Soldiers were dying not just from their wounds, but from infections, from filthy conditions, from complete neglect. And she almost single-handedly transformed nursing into a proper, respected profession. She introduced hygiene standards, insisted on clean wards, clean equipment, proper nutrition, and the death rate in her hospital dropped dramatically as a result.
And wasn't she also a statistician? I remember reading something about that.
Yes, that's exactly what I find so fascinating about her. She used data, charts, diagrams, statistics to prove that poor sanitation was the real killer. A woman presenting data and research in the 1850s, she was absolutely way ahead of her time.
I never really thought about it like that. I always picture the classic image of her, the lady with the lamp walking through the wards at night. But you're right, that only tells part of the story.
Exactly. That image is real, but she was so much more. She was a scientist, a social reformer, a campaigner. She wrote over 200 books and reports in her lifetime. I think the foundation she laid for modern medicine has ultimately saved more lives than almost anyone else in history.
That is a seriously strong argument. I think I've just gained a lot more respect for Florence Nightingale in about 2 minutes. Right, shall we talk about some other contenders? Because there are so many incredible Britons we haven't mentioned yet.
Absolutely. What about Isaac Newton? Because I feel like we have to at least mention him.
Oh, you can't leave Newton out. The man described gravity, invented calculus, transformed our entire understanding of how the universe works. I mean, you can't really argue with that level of genius.
Right. And what I find fascinating is that a lot of his most important work was done during a plague outbreak. He went back to the countryside, was basically isolated, and just revolutionized science in his spare time.
Which is slightly humbling, isn't it? Most of us use time off to watch television.
It really is. Although, and I say this gently, Newton was apparently quite difficult to get along with. Not the warmest personality in the world.
Yes. But I suppose you don't have to be warm to change the world. What about William Shakespeare? We can't have this conversation without mentioning Shakespeare.
Oh, he's almost in a category of his own. What I love about Shakespeare is that he didn't just write brilliant plays. He actually shaped the English language itself. So many phrases we use every single day came from him. Break the ice, green-eyed monster, all that glitters.
Yeah, and what's incredible is that we're still performing his plays over 400 years later. That's an almost unbelievable legacy. Not many writers can say that.
Absolutely none. I have to say, though, and this is slightly controversial, I sometimes wonder how much of the magic is Shakespeare alone versus the whole extraordinary creative atmosphere of Elizabethan England at the time. He was a product of a really unique moment. No, I'm not going that far. I just think context matters. But yes, he was clearly a genius. Okay, and speaking of Elizabethan England, we absolutely have to talk about Queen Elizabeth I.
She was a remarkable ruler, 45 years on the throne, keeping England stable through religious conflict and foreign threats.
And she never married, which at the time was considered almost unthinkable for a female ruler. Everyone expected her to marry and hand power to a husband. She just didn't. She remained independent her entire reign.
And that quote, "I have the heart and stomach of a king," honestly, one of the most powerful lines any leader has ever delivered.
Completely. And of course she oversaw the defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588, which was a truly defining moment for England's confidence as a naval power.
She is a serious contender for the top spot. And we should mention Charles Darwin before we wrap up the main conversation, because I think his contribution is genuinely mind-blowing.
Oh, Darwin. Yes, his theory of evolution completely changed how human beings understand themselves and their place in the world. Not just science, philosophy, religion, everything.
And what I find remarkable is the courage it took. He knew publishing on the origin of species would cause enormous controversy. He knew it would upset the church and much of society. And he published it anyway.
And he actually sat on his theory for over 20 years before publishing. He was so anxious about the reaction.
Part of him knew he was ahead of his time, and it terrified him. But he did it anyway. That combination of brilliance and bravery is truly special.
Beautifully put. So we have Churchill, Nightingale, Newton, Shakespeare, Elizabeth I, Darwin. It really is an embarrassment of riches, isn't it?
It really is. Britain has produced some truly extraordinary people over the centuries. But, final answer time. Are you sticking with Florence Nightingale?
I am absolutely sticking with Florence Nightingale. For me, the systems and standards she created for healthcare have quietly saved hundreds of millions of lives around the world. That's a legacy that I think is almost unmatched.
That is a seriously compelling case. And I'm staying with Churchill, because I believe greatness shown in a single, critical, world-changing moment of crisis is something very rare and very special. He was the right person, in the right place, at the right time.
Fair enough. We'll let our listeners decide. Let's move on to our language section.
Yes, let's do it. This is where we break down the key phrases from today's conversation, explain what they mean, and show you how to use them yourself.
Mine too. So the first phrase is, I have to say. You heard us use this several times. I have to say, the man was extraordinary. This phrase is used to introduce a strong opinion or feeling. It adds a bit of emphasis, like you really mean what you're about to say.
For example, I have to say, that was the best meal I've had in years. It's natural, it's conversational, and it shows real enthusiasm. Try it today.
Great. Next one. Don't get me wrong. I used this when I said, don't get me wrong, I have a huge amount of admiration for Churchill. This is a really useful phrase. It means, please don't misunderstand me. I want to make sure you have the full picture.
You use it when you're about to say something critical or complicated, and you want to soften it first. For example, don't get me wrong, I love my job. I just find it very stressful sometimes.
And our final phrase for today, an embarrassment of riches. This is an idiom. It means you have so many good options that it's almost difficult to choose. Embarrassment here doesn't mean feeling embarrassed. It means an excess, an overwhelming amount.
For example, we have 5 brilliant candidates for the job. It's an embarrassment of riches. It's a lovely, slightly formal-sounding idiom that works really well in both spoken and written English.
So those are your 3 key phrases for today. Try to use at least one in a real conversation this week, even just with yourself in the mirror. That counts as practice.
And that brings us to the end of episode 7 of Everyday English Unlocked. Victoria, as always, this has been an absolute pleasure.
It really has. Thank you all for listening. It means a lot knowing people around the world spend time with us to practice their English. We don't take that for granted.
If you like what we do here, please like and subscribe.
And we'd love to hear from you. Who do you think is the greatest Briton? Let us know in the comments. We read every single one.
We'll be back soon with episode 8. Until then, keep listening, keep practicing, and remember, every minute you spend with English is real progress. Well done for being here today.
Keep learning, keep smiling, and we'll see you in episode 8. Bye for now.
Goodbye, everyone.